filter in. My name's Erin Mahan. I'm the Director of Community Planning, Development, and Innovation, which is the department we'll be focusing on tonight. We have a presentation for you and some activities just to give you a better sense of the various work that we do and all the different priorities that we balance in CPDI. We have Councilor Mike Nugent, who's here for the, I believe, the beginning portion as well. And so we can kind of stop if you folks have got any questions for him before he has to leave us as well. And he is the chair of our Land Use and Planning Committee, which is the committee that we work with the most on our work around the built environment. We'll talk about some of the other committees that we work with and our policy work as well. So I just want to start by talking a little bit about our mission, and then we want to do some group introductions and hear a little bit more and learn a little bit more about you in terms of your connection to this place, this community that we all call home. So community planning, development, and innovation focuses on promoting equitable growth in a resilient and a sustainable environment. And we do that through two divisions that take similar yet targeted, distinctly targeted approaches. One of those is our Community Development Division, which is led by Montana James, and they focus on helping to implement that mission through the development of policies and programs. And she'll talk about all the things that that contains, but that's really our kind of policy and programmatic arm. Walter Banziger, our Deputy Director of Development Services, focuses on implementing that mission through the built environment. And we'll talk some more about that, but that includes our land use planning, implementation of our land use codes and regulations, as well as our building codes and ensuring safety throughout the community. But inherent in everything we do is community, whether we're talking about those policies and programs that meet the everyday needs of Missoulians and focus on things that matter to us, like climate and housing, affordable housing, as well as the places that we all know and love across the community that are a result of our growth planning and how we built and grown out. So I'll let Montana and Walt introduce themselves, and then we would love to hear from all of you, and we can just pick and go through the room. And we would love to know what your favorite space or landmark or place in Missoula is and why. I'll start out sharing. So I came to the city about 8 years ago, came to the city of Missoula about 8 years ago. I've lived in the city of Missoula for almost 30 years now. And came from further north in Montana. And one of my favorite spaces in the community is the Poverello Center, because that's where I spent most of my formative professional career. I was there about 15 years as the executive director before I came to the city. That is the place where I raised my children. They often came to work with me, and is just has a very special place in my heart. Both the old facility, for those of you that know, the big, beautiful Victorian building, and then the new building that we were able to build together.
I'm Walter Banziger. I'm the Deputy Director of Development Services, as Erin said. I've lived in the city since 2021, but my wife has lived here since she was a little kid and is actually a Hellgate grad. We spent, since 2004, we lived in Bozeman, where I worked for MSU for a while as their Director of Campus Planning, Design, and Construction. And then we decided to come back closer to her family and her roots, and we landed here. I'm a licensed architect, both, and so that's my background for the building and planning aspect. And my favorite part of the city is, I have actually two, like the University District because of its walkability and its character and its architecture. And then also Playfair Park, because my kids are there very often playing tennis.
Hi everyone, I'm Montana James. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Development, like Erin said. I was born and raised here in Missoula, hence the name. It's not a very interesting story, but my parents love it here. And let's see, I've worked in local government, state government, federal government all of my career. different times here in Missoula, but also in Washington, in Western Washington. And my favorite place in Missoula is the North Hills. They are just so calming, and I've been hiking there since I was a kid, and it's an anchoring spot for me.
Absolutely. And I'm Mike Nugent. Obviously, I introduced myself a couple weeks ago, and I chair land use and planning. My favorite, I do two, I like that idea. I've always loved the university, I always loved campus, because I think it kind of just, it has so many ties to Missoula, and who we are, and what brings people here. But I also love Karis Park downtown, because to me it's always represented that there's always something going on in Missoula, and there's just, one weekend you could have this really crazy event, like selling things I've never even heard of. I don't want to single anything out because I might offend someone. The next weekend there's Brew Fest, and it's all just kind of there. And I think it always symbolizes that Missoulians really like to create spaces where people can come together and congregate and give people an opportunity to be who they are and everything.
You want to start, ma'am?
Audrey Hayes. I was born and raised here 75 years ago, left for about 33 years and came back here about 8 years ago. And so wanted to establish myself kind of in the community to figure out what all's taken place over all these years. Even though I'd come back occasionally and see things, it was not like coming and living back here again. And then, getting to see from the ground up instead of a visit. My favorite place really is Bonner Park. I grew up in that park. I just love it over there. And it's just, I love the huge trees. I love the, playground area. I just love that there's band concerts there. It's just really a calming place, and I love the neighborhoods around, and you can just walk to it, and it's just a great big open space. And so I just love it there.
I'm her son. I'm Sean Hayes. She completely ruined any story that I would have to say that, oh, I know all about Missoula and I've been here. We visited like a lot, like all the time. Military brat, so I can't say that I was born and raised here, but I did 1 year of Sentinel High School here, so I have some of that. Moved back 8 years ago, about, and I haven't picked a favorite spot. It's all just, I love the whole, everything about the place. There's just something new. Places that you thought, oh yeah, I remember that as a kid, look completely different. There's somebody new. And just one thing that I was just reading, I was on Missoula subreddit last night, and somebody said, hey, does anybody pick out like your favorite people that you've known since you've grown up here or been here for however many years? And there were people who've come up with, hey, do you know Cheddar Bob and like all of these, character people, and they said, yeah, that's what makes Missoula weird, and we're so cool. And so I'm sure a lot of people who've been here for a long time can relate to that. But I just thought that's so here. That's this place. So.
I'm Molly Zohan, and I would say Waterworks.
I'm Karen Berg. I was going to say North Hills or Waterworks goes out there today with the sun. Nothing beats that, but I'll say the River Walk Trail.
My name's Mark Aqua. I've been visiting my son here for about 30 years. So I've seen it really progress. But he finally convinced me to move here about a year ago. So I've been getting settled, learning to think. I committed to a bicycle, so I'm not getting out as much as I want, but there's ways to get out. And I found what I think is my spot at Level P at the corner with a cup of coffee, because I've seen a whole year go by at that corner. And it's a great slice of both Missoula and the people. So
You're a native Missoulian already.
Can I plug to get them to come to our meeting?
anybody that likes the University District, we would love for you to come to our University District Leadership Team meeting. Trust me, you'll be the only member of the public. We're only like 5 people, but like when you talk about Bonner Park, I can write grants to do improvements. You tell me what I should do.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Long-time generational Missoulian. I had to go to California for a good time. I'd like to say my favorite place is Bugby, because I grew up across the street, but really, it's the Hot Angel in Rose Garden. I mean, like, if you want to come and pick me up when I've done something really bad, I believe. So, and whenever I would come home with my studies, I would just go there and sort of take that quiet moment. Hot Angel, yeah.
My name is Megan Cryley McKay. I grew up here, 1976, 2003. Following September 11th in 2003, I packed up and moved to DC to see what the big world was. I've been gone 21 years. And I came back to Missoula last year, 4 blocks away. It's the cheapest district in town. And part of the discussion today. But more importantly, to share my 2 most favorite places in Missoula with my 14-year-old who's going to hopefully grow roots here. And those 2 favorite places are all the peaks around us, which we can hike when we so choose, and the Milwaukee River Trail.
Hi, my name's Andrew. I've been here 8 years, and I would say my favorite place is probably the fort. It's something about like in the evenings, like to play volleyball, pickleball, watch soccer matches, and it's all there.
Hi, I'm Tio. I moved to Missoula just last summer, so I haven't been here very long. I was living in Bozeman before, and I would say my favorite place is also Waterworks.
My name's Summer Nelson. I have a lot of favorites, but I live in this neighborhood, so I really appreciate the Milwaukee Trail and being able to get to like the river out at the levee or downtown. And I'm also a big fan of free cycles. Been involved with as a volunteer through many of its iterations and locations, so it's a Missoula institution.
I'm David, and I like it because when I moved here, I could catch trout for lunch or dinner in my neighborhood. And the other Garden City Harvest Farm, if I volunteer, I could dig worms to catch trout with. If they're not too small or too big.
Perfect size worm.
And no poison ivy.
I'm Josh Nicolaisen. I moved here about 25 years ago, and I too love the university. First Grizz football game kind of hooked me. I mean, I was a lifelong Grizz fan before that, since my folks went to school here in the 70s. And my other favorite place is being at my home.
I'm Tilly Hess. I have 2 favorite spots in Missoula. I've been here for about 30 years, and my 2 favorite spots currently, probably changes all the time, is the Peony Garden at the base of the M. Go there daily between May and June. It's so spectacular. And this one's a moving target, but the Mountain Lion Route 1 that turns into Route 2, for about a decade, I've run the bus basically every day, and I have more friends in this town that I've met on the bus than you can imagine. I love our public.
My name's Robin Childers. I moved here in 1981 to go to school at the university, and I've been here most of the time since then. I love lots of places in Missoula. Our downtown is wonderful. I live on the south side of town, really, Wapakea Park area. And the place I'm kind of moving on lately is actually the fairgrounds. And using Playfair Park and the trail that goes through Playfair, past the Butterfly House to South Avenue, using that as kind of my thoroughfare to get, to the grocery store or book exchange or wherever. But I love, like a lot of people, it sounds like, I love the trail system. I love the trails around, the perimeter of Missoula, but the trails in town were not something we had always. you know, and it's a great improvement for being able to get from point A to point B without always having to deal with the traffic. So, wonderful.
My name is Robert, and I came here Montana about 24 years ago. I was a rancher, I was in town, so I've been in town now for about, this is our big city, Missoula, a big city, and I came to love it. So I've been in town now for about 8 years or so, and what I love most is my home, because I can walk or ride a bike to any of those places you name, which is very specifically why I'm there, and I'm a runner, so it is my trail system as well. And I love it. I can just go out my door and be on the trail.
Alan Noonan. I'm a recent immigrant to Missoula, and I am project organizer with Concord Missoula, and I teach up in the university a little bit. There'll be a course in Irish history if anybody's interested in attending at the Osher Centre in April, and it's the first week of May. Fitting in all of Irish history in 6 weeks should be easy. My two favourite places in Missoula, first would be the interior of St. Francis Xavier, which is a gorgeous church, and all done by one man, very impressive work. So I always like that space. And then slightly geographically closer to heaven, I suppose, is the top of Mount Sentinel. All the way to the top. Forget about this M business.
I agree.
My name is Craig Stolberg. I'm a Flathead native. I came to Missoula the year after you joined the university in '82. Never left Missoula. My two favorite places are the Rattlesnake and the south side of Mount Sentinel.
Hi, my name is Naomi, I'm from Indiana, and I've lived here since 2001, and I guess my favorite places are the river, because I live right there, and also the Missoula Children's Theater, because I work there, so the downtown area. And we only get 2 people at our part of Missoula meeting.
Come on, combine.
My name is Kat. I'm originally from Wisconsin, but I've lived here on and off for almost 20 years. And I think one of my favorite things is the pickleball courts at Rail Lake. I remember when it used to just be a field that you had to like walk around, and now you get to go to it.
My name's Emma. I've been in Missoula for about 18 years, and I love the ritual. It's accessible from my house, and my dog loves to like pick up all the stuff that everyone drops.
My name is Trisha Kirkham. I've been in Missoula for almost 29 years, and my favorite place is campus.
This is Anna. So I'm Julie Maloney with Marsh McLennan Insurance. I've been in Missoula. I moved here from you in 2003. My favorite places depend on the season. Washington Versus Stadium in the fall. In the winter, I'm a basketball official, so I choose teenagers and get yelled at on purpose. So I enjoy being in gymnasiums. In the spring, the trail, and then in the summer, being able to float the rivers and enjoy all that it has to offer. And Megan is my direct neighbor. We share a walk. So.
I'm all of Julie's lead. I'm Diane Hellman. I own Hellman Insurance. I've lived here for 30 years. My favorite place in town is the Fort Missoula softball fields. I met my husband playing softball, and he continues to play softball. We got married on the softball fields here in Missoula. So yeah, that's my favorite place.
Alessandro, lived here for 2 years. I'm an East Coast transplant. And I'd say my favorite places here are Greeno Park and probably the Orchard Homes area. Anywhere where you can sort of escape the tension and blight that I have experienced here in town.
Hi, I'm Matt Goodrich. I've been in Missoula 12 years now? Yeah, almost 12 years. Give it another couple of months. And then I'm a minister at First Christian Church, which is one of my favorite places to be because I can go and look out a different window depending on what view I want to look at. So can people watch at the fairgrounds if there's an event going on, or I can even walk to a coffee shop and watch people there. So I'd really like to just see the activity that happens around. I'd also have to say that the overhang on the side of Mount Sentinel where you can see down the river and also out to the city is one of my favorites. just because like not a ton of people are on that pack trail, so.
I'm Blackwell Hawthorne. I was not born here. I guess my two places, it's hard to choose. It would be age dependent. There was a time period my favorite spot was Missoula Club. I've sort of evolved into, I describe it as world-class dog walking. Where you do not have to get in the car. And that's widespread in Missoula. And it's great.
I love that. That gives me an idea for a whole new round of icebreaker about what was our favorite place the year we moved to Missoula. Mine was very different. But, well, yeah. Oh, do we have one more?
Yeah. I'm Glenn Western Wonder. I've lived here my whole life in Marshall Mountain Park.
It's one of our newest great spaces. Thank you. Well, thank you guys for humoring us with that activity. One reason why we like to hear about people's favorite spaces is it helps us understand community values. And while we create policies and programming that speak to your values, we're also charged with helping the community grow in a way that protects our values as a community. And those values are varied across the community. And so it really is a constant balance of connecting, understanding what those values are, and then working to implement those. So now that we know a little bit more about you, we want to introduce you to our leadership team here. Of course, Montana and Walt, who are here with me tonight. And you'll hear more about these individual programs from Montana and Walt, but we have Emily Armstrong. She oversees our Houseless Initiative, so that's our strategy to end houselessness in our community and the work that we do around the Missoula Coordinated Entry System. Christina Coddington is our building official. Kirsten Hands is our business and finance manager, making sure we operate and get through the day. Ann Geiger oversees our strategic initiatives. That includes work around climate, houselessness, affordable housing. Mary McRae is our land use and planning manager. Any subdivision that gets done in our community goes through her team, in addition to many other things. Charmel Owens is our code compliance manager. If your neighbor has really high weeds or a junk vehicle, you have likely talked to Charmel. So she does a lot in our community, and her team is really instrumental in making sure that our ordinances and our policies across the city get implemented. Maggie McCarthy runs our permits and business licensing program, and Laval, who is here with us tonight in the back there, our community planning manager, which includes our long-range planning, so that growth planning that we do in addition to historic preservation and the Office of Neighborhoods, which you all know well. And then Tracy Pondorf is our grants manager, who helps us competitively bring grant funds into the city and then manage those funds really effectively. So this is our org chart, and you definitely can't see the little faces and the little names, but we just wanted to give you guys a sense of kind of the breadth and the structure of our organization. And if you want to drill in here, this is on our website, and you can blow it up and make it a lot bigger. So before we get into our programs, we just want to talk a little bit about our community engagement philosophy. We've been taking what I would call a different and a bit more of a targeted approach to community engagement over the last couple of years. We've been working really hard to do more than just inform the public of what is happening in the city, but make sure we're engaging in a two-way conversation so that we can understand, again, your values, what you hope and what you need to get out of local government. So the goal of those engagement efforts is to build relationships and to build trust within our community so that you know that we're here and that we're listening and that we're implementing the feedback that we get from you. We're putting that into action. So we work really hard to promote opportunities for you to engage in the things that matter most to you. So the first part of that is making sure you know what's happening across our community. We have a couple of different tools to do that. Our neighborhood leadership teams and the neighborhood council structure is a great way to do that. We also have a site called Engage Missoula, and if you go to that site, you'll see we call them tiles. just like this across the page on a variety of projects. And when you click on that tile, it'll provide you information. You can learn more about that project. You can learn where it's at in terms of its timeline, what decision points might be coming up. And right there, you can typically learn how to engage in the process and leave feedback right on that page. And so that's a great way for you to stay kind of informed about everything going on in the city, because there's a lot, and decide where you want to engage more deeply based on your interests. Our website, of course, is another great resource. It's got a little bit deeper information on our programs and services than you might find on Engage, which is more project specific. So for example, you can go to the CPDI website in our Community Development Division, go to our page on houselessness, and see dashboards, get access to reports that will talk about the programs that we have, also what the current situation in Missoula looks like, how many folks are living in our shelter systems, are houseless on our streets at any given point in time. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about community planning before turning it over to Montana. Community planning lives under our Community Development Division, but is a unique department in that it kind of spans across our whole department, both in our Development Services Division and in our Community Development Division, because it does, again, that long-range community-wide planning in terms of how we grow and what policies and programs we implement. So that includes our land use code and growth analysis, and those are occurring right now we're updating those right now in a project called our Missoula, and you can learn a lot more about that on a dedicated Engage site, but really talking about the vision that we have for growth in our community, and then the tools that we have to implement that vision, and I'll share a little bit more on the timeline and where we're at with that. Resident engagement and participation, and a focus on what we love about Missoula, which we have talked about tonight. The community planning team is that land use and growth analysis team focusing on the code reform update and the Our Missoula Development Guide, our neighborhoods department, and historic preservation. And we have a incredibly skilled historic preservation officer that really works on supporting the Historic Preservation Committee, working on a preservation toolkit to help those in the community who have sites of historical significance that they want to preserve, as well as working on preservation and demolition permits that come to us as a byproduct of our code and state historic preservation regulations. So you all know a lot about the Office of Neighborhoods, but I just wanted to cover a few things. Really focusing on the purpose of our neighborhood leadership teams, which we have, it sounds like some members in the audience today that are involved in those. We really like to promote our neighborhood leadership teams and our neighborhood councils as really an entry point into local government for most of our community. It's really the place that's going to be closest to the issues that matter to you, especially in your neighborhood, where you can connect with neighbors and like-minded folks about how you want to see your specific neighborhood grow and the types of amenities that you want to see develop there as it grows. So really focusing on encouraging resident participation, inclusion of differing viewpoints. We really want to have as diverse representation in those neighborhood councils as we can, so we make sure we're speaking for all of Missoula. They serve to advise City Council and the mayor on neighborhood-specific issues, and they also help to build cooperation and improve communication across the city government. And then lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about our Missoula, because it is definitely the biggest project our department has ever undertaken. It is probably the most impactful thing that we will do in regards to achieving our goals around housing, around affordability, around climate, around housing equity in the next decade. And so we've been talking a lot, trying to get the community as engaged as possible in this project, and you'll see here kind of our 10 primary goals. And these goals were really set at the beginning of the project a couple of years ago after lots of conversations in rooms just like this, where Missoulians helped us understand what was most important to them. That includes creating a structure throughout our Missoula project to ensure inclusive engagement. We have found that we often heard in land use process from folks who were at the table often, maybe professionals in the development community, folks who were already really tied into local government. We weren't hearing from a lot of folks in neighborhoods, especially people who were historically underrepresented, because it was difficult to come to the table. There were a lot of barriers, childcare, time of meetings, transportation. And so we've really focused dedicated outreach on hearing from folks that we don't typically hear from, and that's been a really important part of this project. We also know that we need to address the city's current challenge in achieving our goals, and this includes developing a unified development code that will streamline, reduce conflicts and redundancies in our current code. It will include addressing our growth policy elements like equity, health, sustainability, climate action, and access to affordable housing, things we hear time and time are important to our community. Incentives for inclusive and environmentally friendly development. So as we grow, we want to have climate sustainability in mind. Promoting incremental, well-conceived, innovative, and responsive approaches to neighborhood and community growth and revitalization. We want to grow in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming and that doesn't require any neighborhood to change too much. Encouraging innovative development, encouraging vibrant neighborhoods and walkable neighborhoods. We heard a lot about that in your values tonight. Diverse, attainable housing options. We want people to have choice in housing and at all price points. And then really ensuring collaborative, efficient, and inclusive processes in administering this code. It should be, we are government, there's always a little bureaucracy tied to it, but it should be as pain-free as it can be in terms of coming in and getting a permit to develop, whether it's a backyard ADU or an apartment complex or a single-family home. So here is where we're at in the process. We're pretty far along. So we've already worked through defining the problem, and that came with a very detailed code audit that showed us the tension points and the areas of conflict within our code, where our code was preventing us from achieving our community goals. Then we talked about scenarios for the future. How are the different ways that Missoula could grow and change demonstrated? How aggressive do we want to be in that growth? And then we took the big step of adopting a new land use policy and a future land use map, which we're now calling a place type map. That was adopted in December of last year. And on the Missoula site, there is a phenomenal, it's only a 15-page executive summary. For those who really want to dig in, there's a couple 100-page land use plan that you can read as well. And they really demonstrate that vision, again, what our community has said they want to see in terms of growth. We are now in the phase of updating the code. And so our growth policy is our vision. Our code is the tool that gets us there. And so we're working really intensely with the development community in terms of, again, trying to fix those areas of the code that are broken. We're going to also be talking to the broader community about what that looks like on a neighborhood scale through the zoning designations. And then this summer, we will move into the final phase, which is adopting that development code with our elected officials, including our LUP chair. All right. Yeah.
Once code is changed and adopted, how long does it take for it to then be real?
Yes, so when the new code will take effect 30 days after City Council adopts it. Yeah, so it's a pretty rapid process, and we'll be doing lots of education, of course, tons of engagement pre-adoption, then lots of education post-adoption about what that means for individuals as property owners, as business owners, as renters, all those things.
Is there any process in place for corrections? Like if you guys say, hey, we're implementing this and this is the new code, and people say, wait,
you missed something.
Not my neighborhood, or something like that.
That's a great question, Sean. So there's a couple of things there. One is, how will we know if something isn't working or if we've missed the mark? We've been too aggressive, we haven't been aggressive enough, we just got something wrong. So we're putting in a kind of a really robust performance evaluation system that is really data-driven. We're actually working with the Bloomberg Institute, and we have free access to technical assistance, and they're helping us create this system that looks at the data we already collect and how we can really ask the right questions from day one to make sure we're achieving our goals through the code. With that being said, we have the municipal authority to update our code as often as we want to. And so if we identify something real big that we've gotten wrong, 6 months into the new code, we could update it. It takes a lot of work, and that's not our intention and goal to update it that frequently. Our hope is we have some time to test and practice, and we'll be taking a look at it at least every couple of years to make those updates, refresh, tweak as we learn and as we go. But if we, as you point out, we get something really wrong, we have the ability to fix that as quickly as we decide we want to.
And someone will ask.
Cool.
Yes.
Is this the planners of parking as well?
So to some extent, yes.
Mine in the U district.
Yeah, so what the zoning code does is
Probably
this.
not what you're asking.
Yeah, what the zoning code.
Long-term planning for.
It doesn't, this won't cover parking management, but it will cover how much parking do you need to build when you build a home, a business.
A dormitory.
A dormitory, yeah, absolutely.
Except that the dormitories are on UM campus, and there's state law that basically says entities of government cannot regulate each other, so we don't actually have the authority to tell.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
As you know, but
Yeah.
the rest of us, like, we can't tell you.
I like candles every night.
I know.
Okay, so this isn't, it doesn't do that, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't manage parking. The Missoula Parking Commission really oversees how we as a community decide to manage through parking management plans. But this does determine how much parking people are required to build, if any at all, for certain areas and for certain uses. And when we talk about uses in zoning code, we're typically talking about a residential use, a commercial use, and then the uses that fall under those categories. So I know Councilor Nugent might have to leave us in a short while. Do folks have questions for him while we break before we move on?
And I would just add, as you kind of go through the rest of the night, for those that were there on the first night when we talked a little bit about what our decision space is, these are the rules with state law that kind of create that decision space. So kind of keeping in mind, like, just because your neighbor doesn't like something doesn't mean we can say, no, that's not what council gets to do. And so this process kind of gets us there. With that, I do need to go. My son is a sixth grader. He's in Missoula Red Wave, and they have their halftime show at the Grizz game tonight. So,
Oh, you gotta go.
Oh, man.
And Mike brings up a really good point. We can talk about that a little more as we work through land use regulations, but the zoning code is one component of land use regulation that will reside in the Unified Development Code. That will also contain our subdivision regulations, some of our public works standards, like street standards, engineering standards. Many of those can be set at a local level, and so we as a community get to decide what those look like. Some of those are predetermined at the state level. And some are a mix. Our zoning code is a great example of that, with the passage of a new land use bill at the legislature 2 years ago, we were required to develop a new land use plan and subsequent zoning that incorporated very specific elements of this new state bill. And so we have a little bit of latitude to decide which elements work best for us in some cases, and in others, we need to adopt the state mandate. A great example of that is one of the state mandates was looking at duplexes by right across the community. And so that's now something that folks can build in every residential zoning district in Missoula. And so it's kind of a mix between our local decisions and values and what the state mandates us to do.
What was the impetus on the state level to do that? What problem were they trying to fix?
Yeah, they were really trying to tackle housing supply and housing affordability across the community. The new land use, Montana land use and planning Act covers the bigger cities across the state, not the smaller communities. They can opt in, the bigger communities are required. And it really, it's got some stuff in there that really is just about good streamlining and efficient regulation, but it's largely tailored to address housing.
And not to get the cart before the horse, but what about, once the policy and the codes, and that's kind of where you are, the litigation, the oversight, the implementation, and the mediation and mitigation and all that, big words,
Yeah.
right? That's where the hard work really comes. Where are you now in that process?
Yeah, so right now we are in the process of drafting the new code. So we've got the policy, we have our marching orders from the community in terms of what you want to see us do. Now we're developing the tools to do that through a new zoning map and a new set of development regulations. When those are adopted, 30 days later, they will be the letter of law, and that is how we will develop in our community. Alongside the writing of the code, we're rewriting most of our process because our process changes with the new code. We have to do things differently. And we're looking for opportunities for process improvement as well. Litigation always comes. We're ready for that. Thankfully, that's another department that we have a great city attorney. And we actually, there is litigation at the statewide level right now, pending litigation against the new Montana Land Use and Planning Act as well. And so we do see litigation on all fronts of land use. That is unfortunately a part of doing business now.
I know reading there's some interest in high density development in Missoula, which I'm in favor of. What's the appetite, I think, for like mixed use? Is there any neighborhoods that are going to see more mixed use?
Yeah, so our adopted land use plan gives us some really great direction in that area. I think one important differentiation about how we used to look at growth and how we're looking at it now through a new lens in the land use plan is we used to look at growth through a density calculation or model where on this lot you can build X number of homes. And what the new plan really does and is directing us to do in the code is instead look at it through a form perspective. And so you can have, instead of X homes on X lots, you can have a building that's big. And that building could have 2 homes, but it could also have 4 homes. And we see that a lot today in our most beloved neighborhoods. The University neighborhood is a great example of that. There's a style of home called a mansion home where it's got a beautiful front door and you go in, but you're in a foyer with 4 mailboxes, right? But it fits very seamlessly within the community. And so the new code really takes more of a form approach than it takes a density approach. And that's one way we can get to more homes while also really kind of keeping a neighborhood feel at the same time. Another direction that our land use plan provides is that we want to see neighborhood commercial, small scale neighborhood commercial, so that's your coffee shops, bookstores, restaurants.
Services.
Yes, services. The services that neighborhoods use most commonly, those are going to be allowable in every residential neighborhood across our community.
But we then classify it as commercial property once it has, because that's a different tax.
We don't control the classification, so Department of Revenue does.
Okay.
And so how they'll look at that per zoning code, it will be an allowable use in a residential zoning district. So I'm not sure how the Department of Revenue will look at that. That's a good question, though.
How will that affect, I mean, my dad built our house.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that and I'm saying what you just said. Then my neighbor could sell their house on the corner and then someone else can, the new buyer can decide to put in a little coffee shop, which now changes the value of my property because it is no longer a residential neighborhood now. It's not something that's just homes and children playing and safe area. It's now got a coffee shop where there's lots of cars and bicycles and everything else going on. So now my property value is lower.
Something that we heard from the community is that that was actually the #1 desire we heard from the broader community. But we also know that that doesn't happen overnight, that need drives the establishment of neighborhood residential services. And so we don't anticipate in Upper Miller Creek we're going to see coffee shops and bookstores popping open, but we do anticipate that over time, as those neighborhoods grow, as they grow more densely with more homes, as more people move in, there will be a desire and a need for places that people can walk to, as people want to drive less in a growing community. And so
They can make coffee at their house. We did it for 50 years now. I mean, you know, there's lots of places to. It's not like Missoula is New York City, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, your neighborhoods are, I don't know.
Yeah.
I hate to lose the neighborhoods, period, the neighborhoods. But
and I think we'll see that neighborhood commercial grow out in the neighborhoods where there's a strong desire for it. We see that a lot already in the University District. We see that a lot already in Rose Park.
that's where I live, and that's why I'm scared.
Yeah.
That there goes the value of my home. Right down that nobody's going to want to buy the house because there's too much traffic now. There's too much of everything else, and now it's a commercial neighborhood. It is not residential, so the children that would move into my home to, you know, be raised there by their family, they don't want that now because it's too much traffic. It's got this and this and this and this there, and they don't want that. The people want to buy a home to raise their children in for the next 30 years.
Well, one of the goals of the plan is that we're providing choice, right? And there is that choice, that if you do want to live in a neighborhood where there aren't those neighborhood commercial services, where they're not more connected in our urban core, those are really our neighborhoods in our urban core, neighborhoods like Rose Park, Lewis and Clark, University, Franklin to the Fort, North Side, West Side. They are going to grow out in a more urban feel because they're on bus routes. They have much closer, more compact block structures. That is the natural growth pattern for those areas. So if people like those amenities, those are places where people can buy. And there are lots of neighborhoods across the community that are a little bit more suburban in feel that won't have those amenities, and there's that choice still available.
So I'd have to move, right. So, as I said, my home doesn't have the same value as it would have, because now the zoning has changed, so.
We lost our realtor, we could have asked him that question, but did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, because I hear what you're saying, like the neighborhood structures are changing. And I'm curious if, or I guess there's that, just we're hearing the desire to see more of those services in their neighborhood. And I'm curious how that actually, you've seen that translate in real life. I think it's one thing to say that in a room, and it's maybe another thing to actually see that happen in a neighborhood. So I'm curious how you're actually seeing that translate.
You know, it's interesting, the neighborhoods where it exists today, they've historically existed for a very long time. Rose Park has had neighborhood commercial for the last 3, 4, 5 decades. So has the University District, places like Freddy's Beanery, which was then Buttercup Cafe, now Tandem Bakery. These places have been in our community and beloved in lots of neighborhoods for a very, very, very long time. We hope to see that growth into other neighborhoods who are asking for that, who want that. But we also know that growth can be kind of slow. It's market driven. We're simply allowing it. We have no tools to mandate it, to say it has to be there. We're simply telling the market that if there's a market for this, that we're going to allow for it.
Somebody has to, it has to be profitable
Kelly.
to
Help me
exist.
understand the difference between an ordinance and a code. And what I'm getting at is, like, I've heard a rumor that it's been proposed a few times to require for certain ages of buildings, deconstruction instead of demolition, for example. But I hear that as an ordinance, not necessarily as code. And another, why I'm asking is because, are there any codes that the community has wanted in your process that don't make sense or aren't feasible right now because of the growth of our community, and there's not enough, right? So I've heard we can't do that here yet because there's not enough deconstruction crews in town, there's not the labor force, it would slow down projects, you know, so substantially that there's just no way we could like make that a rule. Yes.
I can speak to the rule in law, and I don't know if your thoughts on deconstruction, maybe. Like the experts are in the room. So an ordinance is law, just like zoning code, and zoning code is typically a pass-through ordinance. And so once something's in an ordinance, it is law, and the city enforces based on that. I can speak more broadly about some of the bigger stuff that we is probably going to come in a phase 2. Our current phase of creation of the Unified Development Code is really on creating this framework of a UDC. So we're bringing, I think 17 or some individual development regulations from individual titles and codes that conflict and are messy into one document so that we can streamline, make it easier for developers to use, clean up, consolidate. And that, in addition to creating new zoning designations across our community in alignment with the land use plan, that's really the goal of the current phase of the creation of the UDC. We know we need to and want to make more innovations around things like green building and deconstruction. We know we need more innovations around housing affordability. We know we need more innovations around parking. We're gonna have some of those in this round, but we know we have more work to do. That's gonna start in a phase 2, which is pretty quickly after we wrap up phase 1. So, yeah. Okay, we'll do one more question, then we'll keep going.
I was just gonna respond to you. I live in the heart of the Missoula neighborhood, and you've gotten Rome, you've gotten the Madison Street footbridge, you've got the new library. We're gonna get something where the old library is, and we've gotten hotels, and on and on and on. So there's been a ton of change in that neighborhood.
Yeah, Heart of Missoula is very unique too because it's our neighborhood that's really our downtown, right? And you have experienced tremendous change, as opposed to our other neighborhoods. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Dive into community development a little bit, but I think it works to ask questions kind of between each section. So yeah. So community development is a term that I think is a little bit mysterious because different communities and states and regions use it very differently. It typically kind of in practice includes programs and initiatives that are funded through federal funding streams. And so that's part of why it varies so much. But then some communities kind of lump development services in under community development, so it gets a little complicated. But let's see. Yeah, I would say generally because of it's driven by those federal funding streams, it'll include elements of economic development, housing affordability, as well as services, public services, and then climate and resilience as well. So you saw this a little bit on our org chart, but our main community development team at the City of Missoula includes our grants programs. That's led by Tracy Pondorf that Erin mentioned. And we have, we're pretty fortunate that we have a number of consistent ongoing federal funding streams to support our community development goals. We've got 2 streams through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We've got Environmental Protection Agency brownfields funds. We do have a local affordable housing trust fund that was established about 5 years ago now. And then we also, as Erin mentioned, work to write other federal grants. We work with community partners to apply for grants. The city can serve as a grants pass-through for community projects. So that grants team has a lot of great expertise and experience in administering federal funds, which can be very complicated and a little bit onerous. Our strategic initiatives team is led by Ann Geiger, and that team includes climate and sustainability staff that are responsible for kind of updating and maintaining our climate and resilience goals, and then implementing those goals and policies. And then we have one mighty housing strategy staff member who really is focused on implementing our current housing strategy to improve housing affordability in Missoula. And then we mentioned our houseless programs team. That is a team of folks that work to kind of steward, update, and maintain our community strategy to address houselessness. And they also kind of provide a system-wide infrastructure to support the implementation of that strategy and to support a really big web of service providers across the community that are working together collectively to meet the needs of folks who are unhoused in the community and align services and resources to folks' needs. So this is still pretty small text, you can't exactly read, but sort of a little zoomed in version of the community development team. We are, I guess, kind of small in terms of number of staff on the community development side, but it's a really great team, and we do a lot of work with not very many folks. And I want to highlight that we do have a vacancy right now. We have a job posted as a grants administrator with our team, so spread the word, let me know if you're interested. And that's on kind of that team of 4 that work on grants. I feel like I'm letting people.
If anyone has to use the bathroom, don't feel awkward about it. Just go in front.
Yes. So a lot of our work in community development is really driven, it's really cyclical, and it depends on the current adopted plans and policies, funding streams that we have in place at a given time. And so rather than trying to explain all of it, I'm just going to share some examples of recent projects, and some of them are ones that you mentioned, so that's exciting. So to give you a sense of our grants team and what we have available for meeting all of our community development goals on an annual basis, we have our Affordable Housing Trust Fund that I mentioned. It has a minimum of $100,000 annually allocated to it through the city budget process, but we are always working on writing additional grants that can support or align with it. The city allocated a fair amount of its pandemic recovery and relief funds to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, just recognizing that nexus of pandemic and its impacts on housing costs and people's kind of livability in the community. And so in any given year, we have usually a larger kind of balance of funds there, but $100,000 is kind of the minimum that we'll have on a given year. Another primary source for the trust fund is proceeds from the sale of city-owned land. So that's really hard to predict, of course, because when the city owns land and it takes so many years to develop into projects or to determine that ultimate use. And so we could, at different points, get more funds into the trust fund and be able to deploy more into the community. And in some years, it might be more like that base allocation. Our HUD funds are not a ton of money to actually achieve the goals that we have. Through that agency, we get about $300,000 a year through the Home Investment Partnership Fund and about $5,000 through the Community Development Block Grant. And in most recent years, our primary goals for those funding streams have been around housing construction, so construction, rehab, preservation of income-restricted affordable homes. And as you can imagine, that much doesn't go all that far in building a house or an apartment building or preserving. But it is still a really important funding source. And we work with a lot of partners across the community to get these funds out. Because they can often provide just that little bit of gap financing of funding that's needed to make a project competitive for the low-income housing tax credit program traditional bank loan, et cetera. So that's usually how they're paired. And then we have still on the books a one-time home ARP set of funds that was deployed also during the pandemic. These funds are a little bit tricky. They have a lot of regulations on them and have to be used in a really particular way. So we're working on aligning projects to actually kind of meet the goals of that funding stream and hope to see those out in the community very soon. And then we have our brownfields funds. And so these are really specifically aimed at identifying any sort of environmental hazard in a property, and then they can also support the cleanup of those properties. So we really focus on the railway kind of adjacency, because a lot of contamination in the community has happened through just through the ongoing operations of those rail yards, painting rail cars with lead-based paint in the 70s and that kind of thing. And so these funds are, I think, really important in helping projects kind of get over that hurdle of the identification and then the cleanup before properties can redevelop into something new. So these are a couple of project examples. Rail Link Park was a brownfields project. This was, and brownfields is one of those streams where I think in all of our community development work, we're usually collaborating with a lot of different city partners and stakeholders, and then also community partners. So many of you might know that that parcel was purchased by the city in 2017 at a really discounted rate from Montana Rail Link. And part of the reason that it was highly discounted is it was a low priority state Superfund site because of some site contamination that was there. And so the city was able to bring our brownfields funds to the table to kind of go through what is a really long process of voluntarily planning for cleaning up and then delisting the property from that state Superfund list. It's long and onerous for really good reasons, right? We don't want people recreating where there's lead-based paint or any sort of environmental issue, and so it's been a really great process to be able to use our brownfields fund, partner with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and now we're doing the actual kind of visioning of the next phase of that north portion of the site. And so as some of you mentioned, there is a beautiful park on the south parcel. That was the first kind of area that was cleaned up with the brownfields funds. And now we're planning for and envisioning what will happen in the north parcel. And you might have heard, maybe through a prior session, but on March 5th, there's a redevelopment. Yeah, 6th?
I think it's the 6th.
Okay, yeah. Another example is the Creekside Apartments, which is a really big apartment complex heading out towards East Missoula. These apartments were income restricted, affordable homes. They were getting close to this, what's called the end of their period of affordability a few years ago, and Homeward was able to purchase the units and keep them affordable, maintain that income restriction and affordability. But they had a lot of deferred maintenance. And so as they've taken on this kind of portfolio of homes and kept them affordable, they've worked with the city to use some of our HUD funds to now just recently kick off a big kind of rehab project of putting new siding on and managing the HVAC systems and kind of just getting them back in good running order to be set up well for that new period of affordability that they're under now.
It is the 5th, I was totally wrong.
What's that?
It is the 5th, the north side of the park.
Okay,
Yeah.
March 5th, got it.
What else? It's like for a lot of housing, part of the problem is you lose, I don't know, slumber rentals, but you lose those more rundown rentals.
Yeah.
But like myself, am I able to apply on my rental for assistance to do the upgrades so that I don't have to take out $100,000 and then turn it into a $6,000 a month rental.
Right.
Like to keep it, because
To maintain
to
that
keep it for,
Yeah.
you know, lower income students, usually lower income.
Yeah.
But like, can landlords apply to keep it low, I guess?
You could. Probably the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a better source for that. Our HUD funds are, there is a lot of regulation that goes into them. And they're somewhat hard to work with. So we've found that typically the partners that are willing to come to the table and use these HUD funds are folks like Homeward or the North Missoula CDC,
People with
Neighbor
staff.
Works. Right, they have staff to maintain all of the grant reporting and to do all the income qualification and go through audits and all of the things involved with the funds. But that's not to say, you know, I think it probably makes sense to have a certain scale to take all of that on. But it's always worth a conversation with us if you're interested. Our housing policy specialist, Parker Webb, is a great person to start with. And
Even just to spread it through the landlord rumor mill. Like,
Yeah.
If you, and you sign a contract to keep it low,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So another quick project example, the row condominiums. This is an example of kind of a project that emerged at the beginning of when our housing strategy was adopted. And it's an example of where the city, in return for the vacation of a right-of-way on this project, really led by City Council, negotiated in return a set aside of income restricted, what became land trust homes, so for sale homes that are capped at a certain income level for folks.
Is that the Reed project?
Yes, the Reed.
Okay.
The Reed is the front building, and then the row is just right behind it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
On the east side.
Yeah.
I think it's 4th Street.
Yeah, kind of between
By the Missoula
Fifth and
building.
Fourth, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that project involved a lot of other elements as well. Negotiation around deconstruction of the historic structures that were there before, and the reuse of those materials down to like native grasses and maintaining certain landscape features. So this was a really cool project for our housing strategy and our housing policy specialist, because we were able to work with the North Missoula Community Development Corporation to really dial in and model for a kind of higher income cap than what they were used to working with. These qualify folks up to 120% of area median income, and kind of test out some of the new kind of housing strategy theories and components, and they will, you know, maintain that affordability for 75 plus years and probably renewed after that. So it's a really long-term affordable home ownership opportunity for the community. Let's see. All right, so our strategic initiatives team, I know I touched on this a little bit already, but we have kind of a couple, what the city has called decision-making lenses that our strategic initiatives team works on. And that's housing affordability and climate and sustainability. I thought there was more on that slide, but it's not coming up, okay. These teams, we have a little bit of a more robust climate and sustainability team. We have 3 folks working full-time on that work. And then I mentioned one person who's our housing policy specialist working on the housing strategy. And their focus is really on maintaining those policies and plans, and then doing kind of whatever it takes, working with community partners, writing grants, bringing in additional funds to deploy the strategies and kind of move us through progress on those policies and strategies. So I'll go into a little bit more on our climate goals. The City of Missoula has very ambitious climate goals for a community of our size. We have a goal to reach net zero or carbon neutral by this year in our municipal operations. And so we're just finishing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for municipal operations and then the community, and we'll be talking about that very soon. We have a goal of 100% clean electricity by 2030, zero waste by 2050, and then community-wide carbon neutral by 2050 as well. And then we have a plan that speaks to climate resilience strategies. So it's a huge body of work that team is working on with really important community partners. And we have a long way to go. Our kind of state infrastructure is really constrained for local government to meet a lot of these goals. And many of you, especially if you've come from other places, know we also don't have, we have a lot of monopoly utilities that make it a lot harder for us to set policy or to even incentivize certain behaviors to reach these goals.
Montana, do you mind providing just like a few word definition of what we mean by carbon neutral clean electricity service?
Yes, that's a good point. So our greenhouse gas emissions inventories really are the tool that we use to know how well we're doing on the carbon neutral piece. And so they really look at, in all of our activities, I guess starting with the city, in all of our activities at the city, fleet vehicles driving across the community, our buildings, all of the kind of assets and infrastructure that we use, they all emit carbon through their activities. And so depending on that kind of category of area that we're looking at, the strategies to reduce that carbon would vary. So we've talked a little bit about a transition to electric vehicles so that we can reduce carbon emissions from fleet vehicles. We have some in our department that we were able to secure this year. Their building emissions are another really kind of complicated source, especially when you're in old buildings, which are a lot of our city buildings. So that's just kind of acknowledging the carbon, acknowledging and measuring the carbon output of our city operations, and then putting in place strategies to reduce that carbon output, ideally, eventually to zero. Zero waste is a little bit more self-explanatory, right? Rather than diverting everything to the landfill through demolition of structures down to food waste, to rather have compost so that things are not going to the landfill, recycling. So that is also a very big goal. 100% clean electricity is also one that we don't have a ton of decision space unilaterally at the city. We rely on partners to work towards that goal. So that would be if, I think all of our municipal accounts, for example, go through Northwestern Energy, and there are some through Missoula Electric Co-op, and it's looking at their portfolio of how they're generating electricity and understanding what percentage is coming from things like coal, natural gas, and what percentage comes from renewable clean energy like wind, solar. So, yeah.
And so along those lines, knowing the end game, is there any data right now that says where we're beginning?
That is what our inventories tell us.
Right.
And
the reality check.
Yeah, we have we're not reaching our 2025 goal, I will say, yeah. But the inventories are really helpful, especially as we now have them over time. I think we started doing inventories in 2016. So being able to see that fluctuation over time and to understand how different sectors are fluctuating or changing, it allows us to adapt our staff's work plan and priorities to really target different areas. So, for example, the city acquired the Missoula Water, the water utility, in 2017. It was a long process. And so once we had the water utility on board, our emissions inventory kind of ballooned because now we had this whole new utility that was contributing emissions to the city municipal inventory. And so we were able to then work really collaboratively with that staff at Missoula Water to look at adding solar arrays to some of their buildings and really tackling well leakage, and it just gives us more information to know how to start.
And the season as well.
Yes, yeah.
And influx of volume.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right, I'll run quickly through our housing strategy. So our other strategic initiative team member. So our housing strategy was adopted in 2019, and the focus is really to reduce the cost of housing, to create more not only income restricted dedicated affordable housing in the community, but also to reduce barriers, in the market to kind of level out market affordability as well. And so Erin talked a lot about the Our Missoula project. That was one of the recommendations in the housing strategy, was to really do an audit of our codes and rewrite our codes to be more functional. And then the other areas of the strategy really speak to funding, so creating that affordable housing trust fund and working to align funding sources into it. Partnering with partners like North Missoula CDC and others to kind of pilot and create new forms of affordable housing. And then tracking and analyzing. And so right now, we're in our 5-year review period of that housing strategy. We're working with a team of experts to kind of tell us, what did we do well? What did we not do well? Did we take too much on at that time? How much has the market changed since then? Which I think we all know has changed a lot. To kind of help us narrow in and target our strategies for the next 5 years. And then last but not least, we have our houseless programs. And the focus of this team is really to support that system level infrastructure. We talk about with this team kind of ending houselessness, and what that really means is making the experience of houselessness for Missoula residents rare, brief, and one time only. So the kind of ultimate measure of ending houselessness in the industry or across the nation is when an individual falls into an experience of houselessness, that we're able to quickly wrap services and resources around them and get them back into stable housing. And so the first really big piece of that work launched in 2017 with the Missoula Coordinated Entry System. Before we had that coordinated entry system, it was really incumbent on any individual who was facing housing instability or houselessness to kind of go to every nonprofit organization, service agency, and ask, kind of, am I eligible for your resources? How can you help me? And the coordinated entry system tries to flip that so that all of these agencies are talking very regularly, working together, and working off the same list of folks to collaboratively wrap around people and make sure that we're providing them with adequate resources. So that is a huge part of our work, and as you can imagine, with 40 plus service agency partners, it's a lot of coordination. We are really focused on data quality, making sure we're communicating really well, and so that is a key role that our city staff play with those partner agencies. And we just worked together across the community to create a new strategy to address houselessness, and so that is up on Engage Missoula if you want to peruse it. And it, kind of similarly to the other areas I was speaking to, works to really tighten our strategies and speak to what are our key gaps and needs within the system and how do we work together to strengthen the system. And then I just wanted to wrap with, this is kind of our most recent set of data on folks who are unhoused in the community. That data piece is another component that's really important that the city provides infrastructure for. And we also work with the organization of realtors to provide this data to their housing dashboard tomorrow. They're launching or announcing their new housing report, and so you'll see this data contained within it. But we also update a page on our city website every quarter, I believe, to just give you a snapshot of, you know, what are the numbers in our community, how many folks are unhoused right now in Missoula. And then it's broken out kind of in some demographic groups, because for our partners especially, different resources target different demographic folks. So that's a snapshot of that work, and it's a really important piece of our ongoing kind of community development, housing affordability, etc.
I think we're gonna pause here for questions that folks have on this portion, and then take a break for a few minutes, then come back and finish up our last section. And if we have time, we have a fun bingo game, but we might run out of time, so we'll see.
So the houses trust fund, is that the only one that's was city funded by sales of the property and that sort of stuff? That is
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So like any ramblings about, you know, about really? Are we gonna get that money? Is it
Yeah.
something answering the phone?
Yeah, it's the federal funding picture is very uncertain right now, for sure. We have staff across the city that work with federal grants. You know, our police department get Department of Justice grants. We've got fire grants. Like, it really would affect every department at the city. And so we are in really close contact with each other, just sharing information as we get it. But honestly, at this point, we haven't gotten any direct guidance or information from any of our funding agencies. So yeah, we're monitoring it. But it would definitely be devastating if these funds went away. My shred of hope is that our, especially brownfields and community development block grant and home funds are really popular programs. You know, they fund projects across congressional districts across the nation. They are really widely used. They have great outcomes. So it's just hard to imagine not having a massive uproar if those funds were to go away.
That might be your
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talk about coordinated entry.
Yes.
Where is the way to direct people to get into the coordinated entry? Because I used to just refer people to 211, but then when I tried helping someone with that, all we got was an answering machine.
Oh, okay.
And I never got, because it was from my work phone, because that was the
Yeah.
only contact way someone had to contact, but never got a call back either.
Okay. Yes, that's a good question. So we have a couple of agencies that are called our front door agencies, and 211 is one of them, that are supposed to be a place where folks can have intakes into the system. The Pavarello Center is another, but a lot of our, agencies across the community are involved in coordinated entry, so even if they aren't advertising that they're a front door agency, they should still be able to do an assessment for folks and get them enrolled in the system.
And if you go to our website, there's a great printable PDF that you can post in your office or hand out to folks that has a variety of phone numbers, physical locations folks can go to. It says Missoula Coordinated Entry System on it.
Yeah.
And it's specific to the coordinated entry system of how do you get these access, how do you get to these access points.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to, maybe one more on the government grants, the federal grants.
Yeah.
Just in your opinion, in your department, what you know about, just get a general view, what percentage of your budget would be connected is now being churned? Or is that unknown? What do you throw, are you willing to throw a number out there?
Well, like the CPDI's budget alone, it's.
I mean, we have, I can go back that slide.
It's about 20 to 30%. I think the important part about that, though, is those are pass-through funds. So we use very little of those funds to fund our operations at all. Some of them reimburse grant specialists and things like that. All that money goes directly to the community. And so we would see that impact. And that all of those projects we outlined would be unable to do.
Yeah. And we do report at budget every year kind of our ratio of federal funding to local dollars through these projects. And I wish I could remember last year's off the top of my head, but I can't. But it's, you know, it's always for the federal funds that come into the community are really highly leveraged through these bigger projects. So they draw in, kind of like I mentioned with housing construction projects, $300,000 on a construction project can leverage, you know, multi-millions of other types of funding. So it would really be felt most severely, I think, like Erin said, through our partner organizations, and it would kind of pause a lot of our policy work.
Yeah, I feel like last year it was something like for every dollar of federal funds that came in, it leveraged, I think, like $7 to $9 of private financing, philanthropic dollars, and other grant sources that came into the community as well as a result of that federal dollar. Yeah.
Adding to that, though, would that include the low-income housing tax credits that are also federally funded?
It does, that is included in that number, but a lot of times the bulk of it is financing, just like traditional financing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
I was wondering, you know, maybe it's just because it's my age, but I was wondering, when did the term, two questions, the term homeless become houseless?
Okay.
And then I was just wondering, because I'm not involved in this, you know, community kind of stuff. I'm busy doing other things, but I just kind of wondered about that. And then I wondered also, I noticed that these are specific goals that we're supposed to be trying to reach, and these terms, equitable and sustainability and inclusivity and a bunch of these kinds of things, are, how tied are we to the United Nations and all of those goals? Is Missoula, I mean, it seems like we're, you know, this is an adoptability type of thing that we're supposed to, that we're focused on, you know, a lot of housing that's multi-family housing, you know, apartments and all that kind of thing, which is kind of another way that they're going rather than single family residences. It's a kind of a, you know, shift for their goals and stuff. How tied are we to all of that, since it seems like we've got those years set, and it's the same thing that the United Nations has set up? How tied are we into that?
From the goals that we have, not tied into the United Nations. So all of our goals come from adopted city policies and plans that went through local planning efforts. So Climate Ready Missoula went through a really kind of long, robust planning effort with community residents and partners to draft that document, set the goals. And the same is said for our housing strategy and all of those other goals that we have. In terms of like apartments, multifamily housing, I think the reason you see a lot of that in our affordable housing work is because that's how we make it more affordable. When you're building at scale, you can bring costs down, and that's how you manage that kind of income restricted affordable housing. But it's not the only kind that we look at.
I like that other thing, which is the, you know, a smaller or a different type of home that, you know, it's an entry, you know, at that level. That's I think that's a great plan, like that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, did I answer all of the questions?
Houseless versus.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The first one. So that's relatively new. We kind of use houseless and homeless interchangeably, but we've been pivoting more to the term houseless or residents who are unhoused, just based on feedback from folks that we serve within that system. A lot of times they feel a negative connotation with homeless and feel like we've heard folks say, like, I have a home, Missoula is my home, I just don't have a house. And so that's kind of how we transitioned to using houseless.
Gotcha.
But we still often have to use the word homeless in
Gotcha.
federal documents or
Gotcha.
in alignment with federal funding
Got
streams.
you. I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to compliment really kind of the historic timeline, how language has evolved. And depending upon where each of us gets our information sources, it's about expanding that to become more current in the different words and the definitions as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's changing rapidly.
We try to put our new houseless strategy has a little disclaimer or comment about that, because we get that question a lot, and I know it can be confusing, and I forget to throw that out there sometimes, yeah.
All right, well, let's give you all a break, and we'll pull back together about, you guys want 10 minutes or 15? So, Walt is going to tee us up next and talk us through development services. We planned our time poorly, which is sometimes a trend for us. So Walt actually has to leave in about 10-15 minutes. So he's going to move through his content pretty quickly, and then we can answer follow-up questions that you have about it. And then we'll close up.
So again, I'm Walter Banziger. I'm the Deputy Director of Development Services. So you're wondering, what is Development Services? Think of us as what you heard earlier was the vision, the goals, the big ideas of what the city can be and should be. Our job is to help lead the community, whether they're the community members, or the developers, the contractors, architects, and engineers. We lead them and guide them and help facilitate them towards that vision, utilizing the land use plan, the zoning code, the building code, and sometimes we're even the enforcers, because we have the code enforcement within my group. We also take care of permits and licensing of all the contractors, developers, and businesses in the city as well. So what do? So the four groups that I have under me are building. Building is basically the building itself, code enforcement. That's the international building codes, that's plan review of the building, making sure that it is meeting the life safety aspects of construction. So we're the inspectors, we look at the plans, we make sure that they're designed to meet the codes. We go and inspect the construction to make sure the contractors are building them to the codes. And we also, the building department administers what we'll call our Acela database system. That is our, it's a national branded database that basically you utilize it. You'll often see it called the Citizens Portal. If you want to get a permit, you would go and create a login in the Acela's permitting system, and then you would go and follow the steps to submit your plans, where they are reviewed, and then a permit is issued, and then you start your construction, and then the Acela system helps us schedule the inspections and so forth, and then eventually when you're done, records it as being completed. Under current planning and zoning, that's the group that basically looks and enforces our Title 20 zoning laws. That's the land use plan and the codes for local zoning of what you can build where. And that's everything that we've been talking about this in our code reform Missoula project that is going on right now, that's going to update all those zoning codes. That group basically oversees that and helps guide people through what can you build where, what do you need to do, how many trees do you need to have, how far do you have to set it back from the property lines, etc. Code compliance, that's the group that goes out basically if somebody has a complaint that something isn't quite right or they believe isn't meeting the zoning ordinance. Aaron mentioned sidewalks. So in the wintertime, we have 24 hours to shovel your sidewalk after snow. In the summertime, we have hazardous vegetation, which is basically if the vegetation on a property gets too high, and becomes too dry, especially in July and August, it becomes a fire hazard, it can be dangerous. So that's the group that goes out, and if they get a complaint, we are complaint driven, so we don't go out looking purposefully to pick on people. Okay, we rely on people to call us and tell us, hey, I drove by a property, it's 2 blocks away from where I live, and the grass is exceeded its height. Can you please investigate that? So we will then go out and do an investigation. We also do the right-of-way, control of right-of-way, so if people are storing their trailers in the public right-of-ways or something like that, we will go out and mark those and ask them to move those, and then if we need to, our group will also coordinate with the removal of those. And then there's permit and licensing. Permit and licensing is pretty much what it says. If you need a building permit, when you're doing the Acela system and you're requesting a building permit, it goes in right to our permitting department. They're the first people who touch it, and they're the last people who touch it. They're kind of the liaison that helps guide it through the system and record it through the database. And then if you're looking to start a business and you need to get a license, that's the group that also does the application processing and tracking of all the city business licenses, short-term rentals, and so forth. So that's the group we have. So building, we have the chief building official, and then we have 2 plan reviewers, 5 inspectors. See, 5 inspectors. Out of the 5 inspectors, 2 of them are generalists. They'll go out and they'll look at building. They also can look at plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. So they kind of can look at everything on the lower complexity level. And then we have 3 specialists that are 1 mechanical, 1 electrical, 1 plumbing inspector. They will also go out and look at a residence, which is what we will consider a simple inspection, but they'll also go out and do the complex inspections of a large commercial building or something like being built at the university. Mike mentioned a little bit that we are not allowed, as one government entity can't manage another government entity. That's correct in planning, at least right now. Planning, they have to tell us what they're doing. We hold a public forum. The community can comment on that, but the public entity does not have to follow those rules. So they can do what they want in terms of city zoning ordinance. That is not correct with building construction. Building construction is life safety. Our building official does have the authority to oversee the construction. So if they're putting in the right fire alarm systems, are they putting in the correct exit quantities for a building? Are the exit doors have the right hardware on those? That kind of thing. So making sure the building is built safely, that's what building officials do.
Yeah, Walter, I know you're limited on time, but you're nailing it. What are the checks and balances? Because as we update those codes, those are staff positions, not elected.
These are.
Right, okay, so where's the accountability? Because money flows. And those changes of codes are gonna affect those in that industry.
Right, and the codes that these guys enforce,
Yeah.
typically, and I'll get to those, you're gonna see them in a couple of minutes, those are national codes. They're based on national codes that the state adopts, and then they become the state's required codes, and then each municipality adopts those those codes based on what the state adopts, and that'll go through now. Current planning and zoning, they do the local zoning ordinances, what we'll call Title 20 right now. They are assisting Laval's group in developing the Uniform Development Code that we're hoping to roll out this summer. Our team is very much involved in supporting Laval's team in that because Laval's team creates it, helps create that big vision. My team has to go out and make sure it's built right, so they know they're the boots on the ground. So if you're looking to do a single-family residence, this group, we're here, do you meet the correct setbacks? You know, those are kind of the big things, is the driveway cuts, is the entry connected to a sidewalk. That's kind of all falls under zoning, right, in terms of ensuring that. In this group, we have a planning and zoning manager. We have 2 supervisors, then we have 8 plan reviewers that do the zoning code. In code compliance, we have 5 folks that go there. 2 of them are pretty much dedicated to assisting in the homeless and houseless issues. They go out and investigate the sites. If there's a complaint on a cleanup, they'll go investigate that, determine if there is a warrant that their cleanup should occur. A lot of people think, well, a cleanup should occur. I mean, those things get tough because there has to meet a certain criteria. I mean, the health requirements, the city ordinance and so forth. So one vehicle, somebody might think that should be moved. We go out there and we have to be fair both to the person who filed the complaint, but also to the person who's living there and look at it and say, does this warrant, intervention? And usually they have to get pretty bad. So before that happens. We have 2 people who do that. The other 3 will do the hazardous vegetation, they'll do the snow, they do the building inspection. So these guys also, they don't do building inspection, but they will go in if somebody complains about something or we get notice that there may be a violation of something that exists, they will go then and check that. If somebody's building without a permit, that's a perfect example of when a code enforcement officer will go out there and they will say, do you have a permit? Do you need, and then they will work with that person to help guide them. We try to be friendly up front and say, let's work with you to get you all set. So they will go out there, help them get their permit, tell them what they need to do. If a building inspector needs to come out and also look at it, they'll arrange that. So that's what they're doing. And then the permit and business licensing manager, we have 6 folks in that group that just basically, they are kind of our front door. They're the people who will come out and meet with somebody. They will collect the fees. They will tell you what forms you need to use. They will help you walk you through a SELA. They will process the building permit, the short-term rental applications, business licenses, and so forth. So they're a busy group. And I'll get to you'll see some of the volume in a second. So current planners and zoning, the things that they oversee basically are Title 20 subdivision reviews and board reviews. Okay, this team assists the citizens with private development projects. They review the zoning compliance. They review building permits as it relates to how that building sits on a piece of property. They review development projects, such as you and I were talking about if somebody sells a large plot of land and they want to subdivide that up into smaller parts, into lots, and then sell those off. The planners are the people who make sure that they're following the right state regulations, the right city regulations, and the right federal regulations in terms of how that property should be subdivided and broken up, ensuring that the roads are properly planned and connected to the next neighborhoods and so forth. Board review projects, if somebody is looking to rezone their property because they want to do something a little different, like it's maybe zoned commercial, light commercial, and they want to, or have a business that they want to propose there. If the project proposal meets the overall land use plan, which we just recently adopted, the next step is that they go look at the land use plan and they say, okay, this land use plan, this piece of property fits these 4 or 5 criteria within our land use plan, and then they will go through and look and say, okay, you want to change your zoning meets the criteria of the land use plan, and then they tell you what to do, and then they will walk you through and guide you through the process, through the application, that eventually ends up at City Council, with City Council doing a public hearing on a variant or a zoning change, and then if it's approved, the zone changes, and then you're allowed to do the project. Let's see. They process requests for annexations. That's also if a property is in a county and it's close enough to the city and it's within what we call our annexation zone. We have zones that we consider, I think it's A and B, right? Where if it's in an A zone, that is a zone that we really want to see become part of the city, usually because we can put it on city services, water, sewer, transit, which makes it much more environmentally friendly. So they'll look at annexations, Board of Adjustments, design review board, that's what you and I talked about, where we got that scaled back a little bit 2 years ago by the state, where design review, where we would basically say certain neighborhoods, certain streets had minimum criteria of what kind of materials you should use, what's the glass, what's the storefront, what's the walkability, how much landscaping should it have. The state kind of took some of that away from us last 2 years ago. They basically said, not anymore, it's too restrictive, you can't tell the property owners how or what materials they can use on their site, unless it is a life, safety, or health issue. So we kind of looked at some of that stuff and we said, well, how much light is going into the building is a health thing. So the amount of glass, I mean, that is a health thing. So we kept those certain things in there, but there were certain things that we lost. Like we can't tell somebody if you have to use brick, or you have to use wood, or you have to, you have to use a certain amount of metal. So the ability to keep a building in character with the rest of the neighborhood is something to manage. Sign permits, we look at those, building permits, floodplain permits, and zoning compliance permits to make sure all of that is meeting the current city zoning codes. Team is very busy. As you know, things pretty much boomed here in the 2021 and 22. Kind of slowed down a little bit in late 22 and 23, but picked back up in 24. And right now we're back to what we would consider normal for 2025. At least it's looking that way. Those are just some examples of some of the properties that they've looked at. And this is the building department. So we have what we call an AHJ, that's the authority having jurisdiction. That's the chief building official. That's the person in charge of making sure that the state building codes are followed. Not the city zoning ones, but the state building ones, and the city adopted state building codes. They provide official code interpretations for the jurisdiction. They manage and guide and review the inspection teams, and then they administer what we call the BCE building codes effective grading schedule, which I will tell you a little bit more in a second. Plan review is essentially, we have 2 plan reviewers. If you're a builder or you're looking to build a house or you're looking to do a commercial property, we have to make sure that it meets the current codes. So you submit your drawings either through the drafting firm, or if you design it yourself, which you're only allowed to do for residential. If you do commercial, they have to, by state law, be done by a professional design, either an engineer or an architect. A lot of people don't know that. They'll start doing a commercial project, and they get a little ways in, and they submit to us and be like, sorry, you have to have a professional architect or an engineer do this because they're a lot more complex in terms of commercial. There's much more involvement with electrical codes, fire codes, sprinklers, safety, exiting, fire separations, all that gets into a commercial project or an industrial or institutional project. So they essentially will review the plans, mark them up, make sure that you've got everything covered, tell you where you need to make corrections, and then give them back to you, and then you go out to your builder and work with your builder to start construction, and then once you start construction, our field inspection team takes over, and that's where the inspectors go out and make sure at various stages of the construction that everything is being done under plan say. If it says that you're supposed to have an 8-inch thick concrete foundation that is 5 feet deep with a 2-foot footing, they'll go out and inspect that. They will go out and inspect to make sure that you have the right rebar in that concrete, so that basically they're ensuring that it's built safely. You have the right exiting. Is your electrical panel wired correctly? Is your HVAC system exhausting correctly? Is it wired, plumbed correctly? Do you have the correct amount of plumbing fixtures? Are they vented correctly? All this stuff, it gets really complex. And they will go out there and do those inspections. And the one thing is that it is the contractor's responsibility to call us and schedule those inspections when they're ready. So we don't just pop in there and say, hey, how's it going? We wait for them to call us and they say, okay, I put in all my rebar, I dug my hole, I put in all my, does everybody know what rebar is? Yeah, okay. Dug my hole, I put my rebar in, come in and inspect it. We'll go in and we'll inspect it and say, yep, everything looks like it's the right sizes, it's tied correctly, it's got the correct spacing. Go ahead, you're allowed to pour your concrete now. And then they're allowed to go pour their concrete. And then we come back and we look at that. And then we come back and look at their framing and we look at their insulation and we look at, so that's basically what we do. In 2024, those 5 inspectors performed 15,259 different inspections.
That's 42 a day, every day of the year. With 5 people?
With 5 people.
How is that possible?
How is it
They're
possible you
efficient.
do that so quickly?
They go out there, a lot of times they will go out.
It's not counting holidays.
They're very scaled too. Some will be a foundation and some will be installation of a water heater, right?
Yes.
So it's very, very scaled.
They're very scaled, so they're not inspecting the entire building when they're walking through there. They're doing, basically, like I said, when the contractor calls up and says, well, I put my insulation in. Come out and do my insulation inspections. They will go out there and they'll do an insulation inspection. And that doesn't take very long. If they get out there and the contractor wasn't ready, they show up on site and they say, hey, you were ready for your insulation, but half of it is missing. Call me back when you're done and I'll come back. And then they'll go and leave. They generally, unless there's something very egregious that they see, they don't go looking for other stuff. They will go out and do the insulation inspection, but if they see something like, hey, wait a minute, you're putting your insulation is in, but you don't have your structural ready. So you gotta have your structural inspection first, and then they will tell you that. They won't do the structural inspection. It's a lot of inspections, yes. A lot of them they can do also remotely. There are certain types of inspections that we can do via video or phone, and we have a system for that where a contractor can go in and basically, I did it actually once on my house when I had some electrical outlets that I had relocated. And they said, well, you got, just take the pictures of the outlets when you're ready, send them to me, mark them up and tell me what rooms they were in, and that's proof that you did it. So there's certain things like that. Now, to be clear, the pictures were for the cover plates, not for the actual wiring. The wiring, they will go out.
Well, do you need me to take over for you?
Nope,
You're good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the phone to buzz from my daughter to tell me. She's at Hellgate playing basketball. So. These are all the building codes that we enforce. These are the national adopted by the state, and then international building code, that's for commercial buildings. Anything that's 3 dwelling units, which is a home, or above, would fall under international building code. Anything that's under that, like a single family home or townhome, is residential code. International Energy Conservation Code, that is the energy code that we enforce. The existing building code is if you have a historic building or you have an old building and it can't be necessarily modified without impacting too much of the historic nature of the building, there is the existing building code that we can use. It often references the IBC for certain things, but it'll give you a little bit more leeway to protect some of the historic nature of that building. International Fuel Gas Code, Mechanical Code, National Electrical Code, Uniform Plumbing Code, ADA, and National Electrical Code there twice, yeah. NFPA 70, which safeguards persons and property from hazards, and then NEC, which is electrical design and installation. There's a little bit of a difference between
What
those.
about fire codes? Fire code.
Fire code is the fire department. We work very closely with the fire department. But fire code is, that is something that is not necessarily locked in time. So like if a building was built 20 years ago, we don't go in and say, you need to make it comply to today's code, okay? Unless you are renovating it. And then we say the part that you are renovating is is the part you have to bring up to today's code, but you don't have to go retroactively and fix the other part. Fire code is different. Fire code does have the ability to go back and retroactively say you have to change something that it's not.
Two parts. Was this the same crew that also had an in-person visit all the STRs before we had the online?
Yes, the inspectors would be the same
Okay.
people who go look at short-term rentals to make sure you have your fire extinguishers, your fire alarms, that your windows are egress windows.
So, how can we put these same codes, and safety's my thing, into long-term rentals?
Say again?
How can we get these same like requirements that we had for STRs in long-term rentals? I've been in a lot that are terrifying.
Yeah, there's a lot of long-term rentals that are terrifying, but we are not allowed to govern them by state statute.
Okay.
State statute treats long-term rentals differently than short-term rentals.
Wow. I mean, there's some restrictions here.
Now, we can enforce if a long-term rental is going in and doing a modification. Okay, if they're modifying something, we can go in.
Like the breaker box.
Like the breaker box. We're supposed to be able to go in, they're supposed to get a permit, and then we can go in and say you have to build it to code. But again, if there are other aspects of the building that were built at the time it was at code, at the time it was built, we can't make that change.
I don't want to get stoned in the parking lot, but you know.
BCDGS, that's the building code effectiveness rating schedule. That affects your house insurance. Okay? How well we enforce building code determines how the insurance companies look at the area and then determine how they charge their rates. There's a grade of 1 through 10, with 1 being exemplary, and Missoula currently is a ranking of 4. I think there's only one other municipality in the state that's lower than a 4. There are 3. There are no 2s or 1s. Nationally, very rare that you can see a 2 or 1. So 4 is a really good number, and that's where we rank right now. And then there's an example of what we're inspecting. Code compliance, primary function of code compliance, investigate correct violations of the city building and zoning ordinance, public works and mobility codes, and other similar regulations. We are not police officers. We are not army. We do not do criminal investigations. We basically do zoning ordinances that are the non-threatening ones. But we work very closely with fire. We work sometimes with the police department when we have to go and notice a building or something like that. But basically, we are investigate citizen complaints as related to the adopted city ordinances. We do prevention and detection investigation of enforcement of violation of ordinances adopted by the city of Missoula. So we'll go out and make sure that you're utilizing your permit. So if somebody thinks that their neighbor is not building something without a permit, there is a website you can go check, and it shows on a map all the permits that are currently active. And you can tell, oh, wait a minute, somebody's doing something over next door and I don't see a permit here. You can call us, and we will come out and check to see if they are doing it appropriately or not. Life safety codes, building standards, land use, public works, right of way, snow and hazardous vegetation, and as I mentioned too, we also help with cleanups of the houses and campgrounds. We work closely with fire, engineering, police department, parks and rec, streets, and the attorney's offices every day with all of these. Yeah. Sorry?
I'm gonna read that.
So code enforcement works closely with all these agencies: fire, police, parks, streets, attorneys, engineering. So do our building inspectors, so do our planners. They're pretty much, our entire department works very collectively with these groups in helping enforce the codes of the city ordinances and the state codes. And that's just a couple of examples of certifications.
I think the house in the middle is on my street.
Is it 9 a.m. or is it within 24 hours of snow?
24 hours of snow, yeah, of the snow, the last my fault. It used to be 9 AM, but I believe that's changing now to 24.
Oh, it could stop snowing at a different time.
Permanent business licensing coordinators, intake review, they take in all the permit applications, the business licensing applications. They help look at our fee charts and determine what the fee application should be charged to that. They will collect the money for it, and then they will also basically track the project. When a permit comes in, it has to go for review to not only building, but planning, sometimes fire, sometimes parks. They're the ones who will sit there and take the plan in, and then they will route it to all the different groups and say, here you go, guys. Here's the plans. It's now open to you guys to review, and it's ready for you to review. And then they will take it back once all the comments are made. If everything is right, they will issue the permit. If there are corrections that need to be done, they will collect all the comments from all the different reviewing departments and consolidate them into one document, and then give that back to the architect, engineer, or homeowner, and say, here's the things that you still need to fix before you do a permit. And those are just some of the numbers. Building permits, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing permits in residential, 3,926 in 2024, 3,302 in 2023. Reviewed building permits, new or remodel, single-family residence, multifamily, and commercial buildings, 1,728 in 2024. 123 sign permits, or zoning compliance permits. Public works permits, those are excavating permits, fence permits, rights of way to pour concrete in a public right of way or do work in a public right of way. Excavation permits, if you're doing excavation to do utility work, 2,795 in 2020. That's with 6 coordinators that take an average of 30 calls per day and 80 emails per day.
What I really love about this slide too is we talked a lot about policy and setting policy for our land use plan about how we grow. This is a great demonstration of we're going to grow, whether we plan for it or not. And so getting out in front of it and having a thoughtful plan that balances all those values that we talked about at the start of the session today helps us direct that in ways that get us people coming along.
Business licenses or renewed business licenses, new ones, 956, existing companies that have renewed 4,165. It's a lot of paperwork.
I think we will pause there. So we have our contact information up on the screen. I know Lavelle needs a couple minutes, I think, to wrap us up. No? Okay, just a minute. So we can take some more questions from folks. Yeah,
Just give me a second. I'm going to quickly just text my daughter and see if she's ready.
Perfect. We'll start with questions and feel what we can.
Should I wait until he's done? I want you to move.
Yeah, we can see if we can field it for you.
Okay,
please,
so it took 5 months to get permitting to move to the door in my office. And that was like 3 or 4 times the inspectors had to come out to look at different pieces. Is there asbestos? Look at electrical, look at insulation. With only 5 inspectors doing 15,000 inspections.
97% of them were done in on the day requested to.
Yeah, but how do we get you more inspectors?
So I think with the permits too, and we'll speak more about this, the delay is typically not with inspection. That process moves really quickly. Where we see delays with building permit tends to be in the earlier phases, working with architects and engineers, and working through engineering requirements, zoning compliance, in different components, and some of that back and forth that happens. The inspection is kind of the last part of it, but the permit reviewing those building plans and all of the systems takes more time on the front end.
Yeah. The inspection is basically based on the current, the pace of your contract. So usually our inspections can be done the same day or next day based on when the contractor calls them in. As Aaron said, it's the getting the permit that can be complex. It depends on the project. It can take anywhere, we basically will say 6 to 8 weeks right now.
For a single family, right?
For a single family residential permit. We will say 10 to 12 weeks for a typical commercial project. That's barring no complications. It's also assuming that the architect, engineer, or whoever submitted a complete and accurate application. We have found that a lot of applications go into the codes have gotten more complex over time. It's one of the things we're trying to fix with code reform. But we have found that the resubmission rates are what really slows things down. If we get a permit in and we can get it reviewed, we typically will say 6 to 8 weeks for residential. We're seeing quite a few of them done in 4 to 5 weeks. It also will depend on the time of year with volume. In spring, because everyone's getting ready for summer construction, we see volume pick up right around now, February, and go right through May with higher volumes, and then it dies down because everyone's doing their construction for June, July, August. In September, contractors start getting nervous again because they're like, oh, I want to get into the ground before the snow flies. I need a permit now so I can dig and get my concrete done. We see September, October, we see a big pickup again in permits because they're trying to get a permit so that they can start digging. But generally, we always are looking at ways to try to improve the efficiency and the turnaround times by reducing the touches, looking at what is delaying some of these permits, what departments might be falling behind. So we're always looking at that, but typically a permit will take around 6 weeks for a single family residential and then 10 to 12 for commercial. Roofing permits, those are electrical. If you're doing the basic heating, water heater replacement in your house, those are usually turned around in like a day or two. If you're doing just a simple kitchen renovation, those are usually turned around in like a few days as well. And again, it goes back to the complexity of the project. A lot of times we find it take longer because there are issues like somebody didn't realize that they needed a licensed architect or engineer to do a commercial project that they submit, and suddenly, boom, we say, oh, it's not stamped, you don't have the correct information here, you need to get this drawn by a professional. We do offer services up front. We tell people, call us as many times as you need. We have a zoning desk that will answer all sorts of questions either by phone or by email. If they find that the project is really complex, you can set up a meeting with them. You can come in and sit down and say, okay, what do I need to do to get this project going? They'll look at the scope of work that you're proposing and determine, do you need fire there? Do you need parks? Do you need planning? Do you need engineering? Do you need a building plan reviewer? And you can sit there and kind of walk through the project, and then they will highlight for you the things that you need to be thinking about, whether you have zoning issues, whether there's building issues, what you need to do for engineering to make sure that you submit an accurate application that first time.
Robert?
Maybe not related, I'm not sure. Sidewalks, residential sidewalks. Is that, what's with that process? And because,
Yeah.
I don't know, we're talking about public safety. I don't know, does that fall under the redevelopment, redevelopment agency? Because we talk about public safety and something because of the cost, obviously, and there's some really dangerous sidewalks in our.
So, are you guys free till 11? You can dig into that.
Generally, sidewalks, driveways, curb cuts, utilities, those are all under engineering. And we work with them for that, but sidewalks are, unless it's the sidewalk from your property line to your front door.
Yeah.
Okay. Then that is part of our planning and building inspections. But once you hit that property line, that's the public right-of-way sidewalk, that's engineering.
But the sidewalk requirements as they apply to residential development will be part of the Unified Development Ordinance. And so we are looking at that. How can, at the point of construction, how can we set standards that are reasonable and in alignment with our goals? And we have a lot of goals, right? We want pedestrian friendly sidewalks, we want street trees, we, want to maintain our urban forest. We also want affordability, and well, the sidewalks, especially boulevard sidewalks, are very expensive. Right now, that expense is borne by the future homeowner or renter of that property when that cost gets passed from the developer onto that homeowner. And as it applies to upgrading their infrastructure, that cost is 100% borne by the homeowner that gets tagged with that sidewalk assessment.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
Yeah, it's a broken system, and the city is currently, our public works department is currently really digging in, trying to figure out how we can approach that better.
I just saw what brought to mind is there was a tree that came down in the storm, and on 3rd Street on the side, they lifted the sidewalk block up. And so I was keeping an eye on it just to see what happened, and they did finally replace this part of the sidewalk that was lifted up. But instead of like taking one more little section out to make it flat, the sidewalk goes up and down. And I'm like, really? If we're gonna go to all that trouble, just make it no. And I would think that wouldn't be a code thing or safety or whatever.
I know we're at time, but I can take a couple more questions if necessary, because my wife bailed me out.
Or for folks, we don't want to be the department that keeps you late. That feels like a bad reputation thing. But we can all stay too. So for those of you that need to head out, you can be around to answer any other questions.
So let me just give you a couple reminders. So next week is session 5, and you're back at council chamber.
Okay.
And you'll